Welcome back, this is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today we're going to be doing this very simple ombre look with the power wash look over top. Gives it this really cool ocean mermaid feel. As always, I'll make sure to put everything that I use today down in the description box below so that way you guys can shop those items if you would like to. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. Start with getting the lid prepared that goes along with the tumbler that I'm using today. I'm going to be using a 20-ounce slurp tumbler that I purchased through the Stainless Depot company. It's a screw top lid, the stainless steel that you see on the top there that I'm sanding, and it also comes with a metal straw as well. So it's a pretty cool combination of tumbler. I feel like I haven't done one of these in a very long time. But as you can see here, I'm just sanding right where that stainless steel is. I don't want to do the plastic or anything like that. And then after I get done giving it a little sand, I'm going to wipe it down really good and make sure there's no debris on there. Then I'm going to come through and take some electrical tape, and I'm going to block off right where those threads are. So I'm just going to take my electrical tape, pull it really tight so that way it has a nice seal on it. After my threads are all taped up there, I'm going to plug up where the straw hole is. I don't want paint and everything to get down in there. So I'm just going to take another little piece of my electrical tape. I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm just going to cut away a circle. But if you want to, because we have to do this a couple times, it would probably have been a little bit easier if I would have done this. You could just go onto your Cricut, measure out the size of the hole that you need and just have some vinyls all prepared so that way you could just put that down in the center. It'd be a little bit easier. But I'm just going to use my tape and do the same thing. But I'm just following my knife right around where that stainless steel meets the plastic that's on the inside. You just want to be very careful and just follow that line all the way around. And then when I'm done prepping my lid here, I'm going to move outside and we're going to start spray painting. Now we're outside and we're just going to be doing a basic ombre, just a two-tone ombre. And the first color I'm going to be using, this one is called Seaside, and that's by Rustoleum. Now the other one is a Krylon because I didn't happen to have a lavender, so this is called Gumdrop. I think, yeah, Gumdrop, whatever blue and lavender you have, it'll work fine as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put my purple down at the bottom here, and what I didn't show was I also spray painted the lid the same exact color that I did around the top of my tumbler because it is flipped upside down, so that's the top. Then I'm going to come through and just make sure that I have that line just going straight in the center so that way we can make a nice fade. This doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to be going over it with glitter anyways, so you just want to pretty much just paint the colors that you're going to be using for the glitter so that way you have a nice base for your glitter to be on. After I get the spray painted, I'm going to go ahead and let that dry, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. All right, we're back. Everything's nice and dry. I did not remove, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I did not remove any of the tape off there yet because we want to go ahead and get our glitter applied first. Then we'll go ahead and remove all of our tape we have there. So the two glitters I'm going to be using today is Ice and Twilight Spritz. You can find those at socglitters.com if you would like to. If not, use your favorite glitters you already have on hand. So I'm going to be using the epoxy method to apply my glitter today. I'm going to go ahead and start with my lid first. Just a small dab will do it. So I'm going to go ahead and spread that all over my lid very well. Then after I get done doing that, I'm going to come through and sprinkle on the glitter right over the top. After I make sure everything is nice and coated with my glitter, I am just going to go ahead and remove the tape. But the reason why I'm going to go ahead and do it now is because we use such a small amount, it's not shifting or going anywhere. So go ahead and remove everything now so that way you don't accidentally epoxy it down to your lid. And then we'll move on to the tumbler base and adhere our glitter down the same exact way with the epoxy method. So I'm just going to apply a very small amount of epoxy onto this. Now, after my epoxy is all smoothed onto my tumbler, I like to start at the very bottom first where I'm not holding my tumbler up too much. And then as I start to drape that glitter around the side, I'm holding it almost upright so that way that glitter can cascade down. And then I stop about right in that center point with that particular color. And then we're going to move on to the top color there. Again, focusing around the rim first, letting it naturally cascade down on top of the blue color at the bottom, and just kind of working my way down and tilting my tumbler further and further as I go, and you will start to be able to see that beautiful ombre effect take place. Now, after I sprinkle on my purple here, I do come back through and sprinkle on a little bit more of my blue, just really fading everything together, making sure everything is nicely filled in. Then I'm gonna go ahead and stick that off to the side. There we go. I'm gonna let that cure, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. And after everything has cured, we're going to come through with our chip brush and sweep away all that extra glitter that just didn't adhere down to our epoxy before we get our first coat of epoxy over top here. And of course, every time we epoxy, we have to tape off our threads. So I'm going to come through, tape up my threads really well. And of course, before I epoxy, I made sure to give it a good spray of my 2x Ultra to make sure none of those glitters shift around on me. Now, I have about 20 to 30 milliliters of epoxy mixed in I think it's just 20 milliliters of epoxy mixed up in my little cup there. I'm gonna go ahead and apply almost all of that because I wanna save just a little bit for the lid. You don't need too much. And the only reason why I'm not doing a full-on 30 milliliters over top of this is because I want to sprinkle some glitters over top here in a minute. And I like a thinner layer when I know I'm going to be doing that, so that way this doesn't become such a thick tumbler, if you know what I mean. So that's why I'm doing just a thin amount of epoxy over top this round. Now, after I got that nicely epoxied, I went ahead and put it onto my turner, and then I'm gonna go ahead and give my lid a nice thin coating as well. You may notice I did not plug up the center of this round. I'm just being very careful when applying my epoxy, making sure that epoxy doesn't drip down into the hole, and I'm just making sure it goes all the way up to the edge there that I glittered. And of course, before you sprinkle on your raw glitter, you wanna go ahead and hit it up really good with your torch now. You don't wanna do it after you sprinkle your glitter on. Now, the first glitter I'm going to be sprinkling down is called Bubbles. Now, you may have wondered why I did not just add it to my epoxy. Well, this particular glitter here is very large, and I just find it works better if I just sprinkle it on rather than trying to mix it into my epoxy. It just works out better for me because these are such large pieces and I don't want a chance kind of breaking them or bending them. So for me, just sprinkling it on this way is good. So after I sprinkle that onto my tumbler, I'm also going to sprinkle that onto the lid just a little bit. And then I'm going to come through with a knife or a silicone tool. And I'm just going to make sure that everything is nicely pressed down, nice and flat. And if there's any pieces that I feel like are going to be a nuisance, I'm going to remove them now, especially on the lid. I'm going to make sure everything is nice and flat on the lid because there is a little bit of a lip there at the top, as you can see. So you just want to push everything around and make sure that it's going to be completely flat against your surface. Now, the second glitter I'm going to come through and sprinkle on is called Siren Song. It kind of flip-flops between purple and a blue, so I thought it would go really well. So all I'm going to do is sprinkle that over it completely, and then I'm going to come through and add like bigger sections of it. You'll see what I mean here. But I just wanted to make it look like underwater scene because we're going to come through and do that power wash look over top, and I just wanted it to look kind of like an ocean floor or an ocean bottom in a way. And of course, sprinkling a little bit onto the lid as well. Now, after I get done doing that, I'm just going to come through with my opposite gloved hand there and go ahead and smush all that chunky glitter down onto the tumbler, making sure, again, it's nice and flat, just like we did with the bubbles. Because we use such a thin amount of epoxy, you just really want to make sure it can move around and shift and lay down flat for us. Now, all that is left to do is let that cure, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. Now, after that is cured and before we apply our flood coating over top of this, I went ahead and sprayed it up really good with my semi-gloss clear. That's going to ensure that those larger glitters that we used or laid down won't wick away our epoxy. So I have about 30 milliliters of epoxy here. I'm going to go ahead and apply all 30 milliliters over top of this. And of course, the same thing that we did with the tumbler, we're going to do with our lid. We're going to go ahead and give it a nice coating of our epoxy, making sure to remove that tape after we're all done. And again, I didn't put the hole in the middle there. I'm just being very careful around that hole so that way this epoxy doesn't dip down into it. And of course, when I'm using my torch on my lid, I'm just being very, very careful so that way I don't mess up the plastic on the inside. You just want to hit it up really quick with your torch and that's it. So now we're going to go ahead and let that cure, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. Now, after that portion of epoxy over top of your raw glitter there, if you feel like you just need another coat of epoxy over top of it before we move on to power washing, go ahead and do that. But because I made sure that I squished everything down really well as I went and made sure that I had a nice flood coat over top of everything, I felt like this was pretty good to go for me. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up my rim. I'm going to sand my tumbler down really well, and then we'll be ready to add our power wash portion. Now the power wash is super simple. I'm just using this Dawn power wash. I have some just basic flat white primer paint that I'm going to be using, and all you want to do is take your Dawn power wash and you're going to use that as like a mask, and it's going to create these really cool effects on your tumbler, kind of looking like water, you know. So I'm just going to fully load up my tumbler here with that power wash. Then after I get my power wash put on, I'm going to move straight into spraying it with my white spray paint. So here I'm done spraying it with that. Now I'm going to spray it with my white spray paint. So just, this is real time. I'm not slowing it down or speeding it up. Now, after I load this up with my white spray paint, all you're going to want to do is remove that power wash off of your tumbler. I'm just going to use a hose, but you can use a water bucket, whatever you have on hand to be able to rinse it off. So right away, I'm just going to move right into rinsing it. And there we go. We're left with that really cool power wash effect over top. And of course, I'm going to move right into the lid as well. I did go ahead and plug up that hole, and I taped up the bottom as well so I don't get spray paint on it. Same thing. I'm going to spritz. I did a little bit too much power wash with this, but I'll show you what I do here in a second. Spritz it with my power wash, give it a spritz with my white spray paint, and then when I rinsed it away, I realized it just needed kind of a bit more. So let me go ahead and rinse it here. But it's completely fine to come back through and do it again if you just don't like the effect that it did it. You see most of it kind of washed away because I added too much power wash, and that's all that was with that. Now usually I kind of dab the water off, but I went ahead and just spritzed one more time with my power wash right over the wet lid, came back through with a bit more of my spray paint and rinsed that off really good, and I really liked how that turned out this time around. And all I'm going to do after this is just kind of let that air dry for a little bit, and then I'm going to take it inside and make sure that it's completely dry before we move on to the next step. Now while that dries, we're going to go ahead and do up our decal. Again, I'm going to be using that Yearbook Solid font that I used last week for that Mama Milky Way swirl that I did. But I just really like the simplicity of it. So you just want to type up your word mermaid, apply an offset to it. Now for the word vibes down here, what did I use? I think I used wildflower, I do believe, but I'll make sure to put the fonts that I use down in the description box for you guys. And again, I'll try to make sure to find good replicas of these texts as well for you if you don't happen to have these on your Cricut or whatever cutting machine you have. But this is super simple, and you can make it say whatever you want. You know, it doesn't have to say mermaid vibes. It could say whatever you'd like on there, okay? So the gray portion there, I'm going to cut out in this opal mermaid vinyl. I'll show you guys here in a second. The black portion, which is my offset, I'm going to cut out in a lavender vinyl, and then the vibes, I'm going to cut out in just a basic black vinyl. And before I save it, I go ahead and make sure that I'm going to have it exactly how I want it on the tumbler before I save it. This is really going to help out and make sure that you know exactly where to put your decals, like the vibes there. I'm going to note right where that dot is on the eye, so I know where to place it on the tumbler. All right, everything is nice and dry and we're ready to apply our decals. Yes, I am going to be applying my decals right over top of our paint here. We used a flat paint and there's really not that much of it, and I feel comfortable going ahead and applying my decals. Now here's that opal vinyl I was telling you about, super cute. I really like how it has that mermaid look to it, and I'm just showing you all my decals. Now we're gonna go ahead and get these layered on. Super easy because I'm using a straight tumbler. So I'm going to put my offset down first. I'm going to make sure that I have enough gap at the top and the bottom. And I am applying this from the word going from the bottom to the top. This time I just really like the way that looked. Sometimes I like to do it the opposite way, from the top to the bottom. It's really all in what you want to do or what your customer wants to do, depending on if you're making this for yourself or for a customer. Then I'll go ahead and come through and lay down the top portion of my look here. And again, what I like to do to center it down is focus on the center of my letters, making sure the gap all the way around them is nice and even all the way down, and then just press it down from there. And then my last word, I'm going to remember that the I goes a little bit under that M, so that way I know about where the center's at. This is very helpful. I'm going to go ahead and burnish that down really well. And of course, all that is left to do is apply our finishing coats of epoxy, which before I did that, I went ahead and sprayed it down really good with my 2x Ultra, making sure those vinyls don't wick away my epoxy. And of course, retaping my lid and all that stuff, getting its last coats of epoxy on as well. Now, I do have to say before I go that I do love these tumblers, but man, having to tape and retape every single time, I'm just saying. I think that's why people rhinestone these, you know? Still cute though, but whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.